Blog Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome to episode 142 of Songs of Selah here on 17 Pneuma Radio. Thank you for tuning in this evening. I'm your host, Scott Thomas Outler, and we're set to have an exciting show ahead. Coming up in the next segment, I'll be joined by tonight's guest, Beth Hermes. Beth has appeared on the program in the past, and she'll be returning tonight to talk about some of the writing workshops and projects she's currently involved with, including events she hosts at the Foxtail Bookshop and those she coordinates with the Atlanta Writers Club, a very cool organization here in Georgia. So I'm looking forward to talking with her about those events, as well as finding out what's been going on this year with her own writing and with her spiritual fantasy series of books, The Light Bearers. So stay tuned for a conversation with Beth Hermes in just a bit. And in the meantime, please be sure to subscribe to the channel while you're listening here on 17 Pneuma Radio. Thank you to everyone who supports the show by spreading the word and sharing episode links. Your support is always greatly appreciated. 'Tis one thing not to cry when the milk spills, but when the cookie crumbleth too, what else is a man to do? That short piece is entitled Levee Breach. It was included yesterday as part of the Sunday poetry page at Dissident Voice. Thank you as always to Angie Tibbs for allowing me to contribute at her site each week. Links to my recent publications at DV and in other venues can be found at 17pneuma.com. All past episodes of Songs of Selah can be found in the show's archive there at the website as well. I've been watching videos of lions, hyenas, wild dogs, giraffes, buffalo, and other beasts inhabiting the jungles and plains of late. I'm not sure how I initially got sucked down this particular rabbit hole, but good Lord, what a savage carnival of mayhem is put on display when the craze of the hunt takes over. We have a tendency, I believe, in this modern age of silicon and fiber optics, to glorify nature from the comfort of our centrally heated homes, tucked safely beneath soft sheets, fortified securely behind brick walls. Well, overall, in the grand scheme of things, there are plenty of good reasons to sing such praises, for nature is pretty damn spectacular and beautiful, what with the mountains, and the valleys, and the sunrises, and the oceans, and the rest of all its awesome splendor. But watching ravenous animals annihilate one another before feasting upon the flesh of the carcasses laid to waste in the wake of their slaughter has provided an important reminder to me of late about just how brutal certain aspects of life will always remain. So much for evolution toward enlightenment in regards to peaceful and harmonious consciousness in some species. But what need do lions have for thumbs? Or the ability to strike fire into creation? They're more primal still, and far too eager to dine than spend superfluous time dreaming up recipes for elegant dishes. Rare and raw is the whole of the law on their menu. My father once told me about his two Irish setters, Trojan and Brutus, brothers of their mother Brandy. How they kept everything calm and held tightly together for 364 days of the year, but on that other infamous day they would have a hellacious fight, like clockwork, to determine who would reign over the backyard for the coming cycle. Trojan held the crown until, eventually, he didn't, pecking orders all the way down. Yet still the squirrels frolic, for what it's worth. 2 hills of beans, maybe, and all the doomsday storage supplies the heart of dystopia could ever long for. And butterflies still flutter at the most fortuitous and synchronistic moments, despite plague in the Wuhan age, in spite of curses and spells cast of fear. Witnessing the chaos wrought out in nature's killing fields brings a greater appreciation of how utterly miraculous the fact is that some parts of the world actually live in a relatively civilized manner. Of course, how long such orderliness will last is anyone's guess at this point. The threads have loosened, the tongues are babbling, the structure trembles. From out the gene swarm soup, down from the branches, out of the caves, into our huts. It's been a long, diligent, methodical journey of survival through the ages to reach this current act we find ourselves in upon the stage, though the play has barely just begun churning out drama, considering the climactic action that lies ahead and who's lurking behind the scenes. The part of the script I just don't get is why, in the name of any L that ever walked the earth, do we allow the most reptilian sorts of creatures to control the narrative and flow of information, much less every other lever of power and influence throughout the empire? Seems rather silly. Switching gears, I'd like to take a moment and say thank you to Sunil Sharma and Anurag Sharma at Setu Mag for allowing me the opportunity to serve as guest editor once again this year for the 3rd annual edition of Setu Mag's Western Voices. This year's issue was recently published and features the work of 31 inspiring poets whose contributions made it all possible. A link to the 2021 Western Voices edition can also be found at 17numa.com. I encourage anyone interested in keeping up with my work to subscribe to the site and keep in touch with me there. Alright, that'll just about wrap things up here at the top of the show. I thought I'd close this segment out tonight by playing a recent collaboration with Greek pianist Elise Kaiser. She wrote the music for and created this track that an excerpt from my book of Sand and Sugar appears on. So let's listen to Elise Kaiser's production of Blue Pines before we head into a music break, and then we'll return on the other side with tonight's guest, Beth Hermes. Stay tuned. I consulted my stars during a dry spell in the plains. They told me to lie down in the grass, make a blanket of the leaves. Told me to build a fire in the season when the sky grows cold. Told me age is just a number until it kills you. Warm in the bones where the ache melts. Told me the trees will always love you, but they alone cannot protect from a storm. Told me that even saints will cheat when they're trying to save the soul of a sinner. Told me clocks of time are just illusions, so add another hour when you're feeling slow. I spoke to my ghost in the night with the moon hung low. They told me every choice leads to another, but don't forget to breathe. I'll sigh, if you will, gasp between notes of shadow and shade. Good morning, soft smile, great consequence in the space where anger and love both swallow the tail we've been chasing. 0 point graduation, hallelujah-induced hallucinations. They seeded the skies with prayers of smoke and chimera poisons. Magnetic tongues, wet, spark, electric hymns. Messy with the way we hum our promises, but well-tuned to the bed of salvation. Songs of Selah here on 17 Numa Radio. It is Monday, April the 12th, 2021. If anyone is interested in appearing as a guest on a future episode, please feel free to get in contact with me via email at 17numa@gmail.com. And turning attention to tonight's guest, a graduate of Auburn University School of Journalism, Beth Hermes has been a professional writer for nearly 30 years, with articles published in numerous magazines, newspapers, and online publications. As a freelance writer, she has created award-winning marketing campaigns for individuals, corporations, and nonprofit organizations. Since 2009, Beth has shared her gift of storytelling as a writing coach, teaching creative writing classes and business writing workshops. She encourages her creative writers to share their work through critique workshops and the publication of an anthology consisting entirely of short stories and poems written by her students. Her business writing workshops focus on developing clear messages to enhance personal and business success. Her instruction also includes journaling and strengthening the creative muscle. Beth is the author of a spiritual fantasy fiction series called The Light Bearers. She is currently completing work on the 7th book in the projected 11-book series and is working on a memoir and collection of prompts and ideas from her numerous writing workshops and classes. In 2017, Beth and her husband Craig fulfilled a lifelong dream to own a farm. They live with their college student son Benjamin, her horse, 2 rescue dogs, a cat, a donkey, and a few dozen chickens. Their daughter Abigail is a professional artist and art instructor. Beth, thanks so much for joining the program here tonight. How are you?
I'm great. How are you, Scott?
Doing fantastic, thanks. Beautiful
Good.
weather here today in Georgia.
Can you hear me okay? I've got you on speaker.
Yeah, you sound fine.
Okay, great. Yeah, you made me sound pretty good. I like that.
Well, it's easy with a resume and bio like that. It reads pretty well.
Well, thank you. Thanks.
So how are things there on the farm here in 2021?
It's actually really nice. I'm so glad we lived on a farm during the pandemic because there's always something to do. We were never bored. A lot of people said they were bored for the last 12 and a half months, and we have not had that problem.
Always something to take care of, I'm sure. But yeah, having
absolutely
privacy and a place to sort of settle in as all the madness goes on around must have been a nice little trick to pull off there.
Yeah, exactly. Some divine intervention there got us here before everything happened, so that was cool.
What is the donkey's name?
Well, I'm a writer, and I love fiction and literature, and so his name is Hody, so that I can call him my donkey, Hody.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
we're a little obnoxious, sarcastic here, so yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great line. Having all that time to spend there on the farm, what are some of the things that go on a daily basis, keeping things in order and tending to all the tasks?
Yeah, it's it's weather permitting a lot of the times, but everybody always has to be fed. So all the animals, and we have a lot of mouths to feed. All of them have to be fed twice a day. So that takes up a big chunk of every day, regardless of the weather. You don't feel like going outside, and you're like, all right, fine, I'll put on the galoshes and the overcoat and go outside. But cleaning up after the big animals especially. The birds also have to be cleaned up after. And we've got a couple of ducks, too, and I just found out my white Pekin duck is a male, and one of the female ducks has created a little nest, so I'm going to see if we get ducklings out of that. I haven't collected the eggs for a while. We'll see what happens there. Yeah, and then my husband is he's on vacation this week, and vacation from his regular job means doing a lot of work on the farm, so it's a lot of physical labor. So he's got tomatoes that he started from seed, and we have 5 rows of vegetables already out from stuff that he started from seed out there. So, production is coming along.
Awesome. Yeah, bounty awaits in the future. That's great. And how often?
Oh, yeah, it was a delicious summer last year.
Very nice.
Yeah, and it must everything must taste so much better knowing that it came directly from your hands. A bit of a satisfaction in that.
Absolutely. We can't buy store-bought eggs anymore. It just doesn't taste the same.
Oh, wow. Get spoiled on the good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know that your horse there is a big part of your life. How often do you get to go out riding these days?
Well, the last couple of weeks it's been really nice. So out of the last 15 days, I've ridden 12 times.
Oh, wow.
So it's nice having her here. Yeah, she moved over here last summer, and I have my best friend who retired last year moved her horse here too. So we've got those two and Hody who share the pasture. I've got a little barn for the two horses. The donkey does not like to be closed in, so he roams around at night. And even if I give him shelter, he likes to sleep right in front of the girls because those are his buddies. So, yeah,
good.
But I do get to ride often, and that's a blessing. Oh, they get along great. In fact, we were riding this afternoon, and after we turned them back out, my best friend said it's amazing how peaceful they are. They all just really love being together. And, you know, you take the two girls out to be ridden because the donkey is not rideable, obviously, and he stands there at the fence and just waits and makes sure we don't do anything bad to them. He doesn't understand the whole saddle thing.
Yeah. Nice. They have a protector watching over. That's cool.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Well, that's wonderful. Everything is going well there on the farm, and I know you've got a lot of other things going on as well. Talk a little bit about
it's juggling.
Some of the events you have coming up with, I guess you've got a lot of stuff going on. You got what you do there at Foxtail Book Shop, excuse me, and then the Atlanta Writers Club. What's on the agenda here recently?
Oh, goodness. Let's see. I just wrapped up a couple of classes at the end of March with both Foxtail and KSU. I teach it through the OLLI program at Kennesaw State. And I last week started an 8-week class at Kennesaw, and I'm starting tomorrow night a 6-week class through Foxtail. The one at Kennesaw is a hybrid program. So I've got 2 classes that I'm doing. I've got a creative writing class and a memoir writing, nonfiction class that I'm doing there, and they are hybrid classes. So I have several students in the classroom and then others online. So I don't get to walk around and be crazy. So like I usually am, I like to move around a little bit and write on the board, and everything now has to be where I'm sitting in front of the camera. So that's made it interesting. This is my 3rd semester teaching that way. And then all of the Foxtail classes are currently online. So I did the one at the beginning of the year, and I have this one that starts tomorrow night. And both of those are completely online. We just send everything out. It's kind of nice in a way. I mean, I really love the personal interaction with having folks in a room together. But there's no excuse for missing, really. Like, people who are not in town can still log in and join the class if they want to. So it works out pretty well.
What has been the feedback with students that take your classes that have had the in-class experience and now doing it online? Are they able to adjust pretty well as also?
Yeah, for the most part. It's my older students at the OLLI program who are having the hardest time, because the hybrid, the in-class students complain that they can't hear the virtual students and vice versa. So that's been a little bit of a challenge. I just tell everybody they have to talk really loud. But we've had a little spin-off of the classes that I do through the bookstore. Folks who have taken classes with me for years all of a sudden decided that they wanted to start. They asked me when I was going to be able to have a critique workshop, and because I have one usually once or twice a year, I hold a critique workshop. And I said, well, let's just have one on a weekend. And we did last April, and it grew into an every other week drop-in. Like, people don't always come. We don't always have the same people. But they're almost finished with their books. It's kind of cool. So, and they're really good books. So that's one thing that's kind of grown out of it, and it's been a positive. And the one thing that they do say is that they can't wait until they get back in class, because it's really nice to know people. But getting to know folks online has been fun too. So.
Yeah, and especially with the networking aspect among writers, I think having that personal connection is probably going to be good. But I guess being stuck in everyone's houses has led to a creative frenzy. So everyone's getting their
it's funny. The first half of last year was not really creative. I think people were just kind of freaked out. And I've talked to friends who are, longtime published writers, and they even said it was difficult to get started on projects last year because they really didn't feel it wasn't a normal thing. So, where you usually you go about your routine and you come home and you have your writing time or whatever, or you start out in the morning and then you go about your routine. They didn't have that. And so a lot of folks kind of stalled last year. And so this year it seems like the writing frenzy has it began somewhere around September, October. And now we see a lot of work coming in. My writing students have said that they feel like this has been a good thing as of the second half of last year, and that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I guess a time of acclimating to the whole new situation, and then that pent-up energy bursting forth now.
Or just, kind of taking it all in stride at some point because, you can't just deny that it's happening forever. At some point you got to go, okay, resign yourself to the fact that you're stuck at home. So what am I going to do? Oh, well, that's right. I like to write. Let me go ahead and take this time that I always say I need. And I think that finally came around.
Yeah, absolutely. And really just focusing on those things that people have said they're going to be doing for years, the books you wanted to read and the things you wanted to write.
Yeah.
Now, really that has been that opportunity. You talked about the way it sort of flipped people's routines around, obviously, being something brand new. How does it affect your work? What type of routine do you have with your writing?
Oh, yeah. Actually, I keep thinking I need to slow back down because this year it seems like everybody sort of figured out how to bend the rules a little bit and not like, make anything unsafe, but okay, we've figured out how to do online stuff where we meet, one-on-one and we're social distanced outside or something like that. And so when I meet with clients, a lot of times I try to do it virtual, but some people just don't like that. So, but this year it seems like everybody's like, okay, we're ready to go. And now I'm like, okay, I want to slow down a little bit. I kind of like got used to that slower pace, and I enjoyed it a lot. It's a getting back used to being in, what we called normal, and now I'm not so sure that normal was always such a good thing. So I enjoyed having the writing time. I had several projects that I was able to work on last year, and I'm trying to squeeze those in. And one of my writing partners, I have a group that I meet with. We were doing virtual. We were meeting once a week or twice a week at a coffee shop, and the coffee shop closed down. Even before COVID, they were going to be shutting down. So we went virtual last March, and we've just started meeting because there's like this neat little place around the corner from me, and it's in between both of, all three of our homes. And so we meet there once a week and sit outside and have coffee and what have you and talk about our writing projects. And we were talking about how it's just kind of nice to have that time and let's work on these projects instead of just, jumping back into everything, So I think that's important. Recognize a new routine and what was really normal and how much were we accepting it, But anyway, one of my friends in that group said, your creativity is not something to be done in your spare time. And I thought that was really profound. And I said, yeah, and I think this last year has kind of taught us that.
Your creativity is not to be found in your spare time. I like that a lot, yeah. And with a lot of writers, it's with them constantly throughout the day, all details of life sort of pointing back to that nexus of where the next idea is going to come from. What are some of those projects that you were talking about having worked on? I know that you've got your Light Bearers series. How's that one coming along?
That one was actually on hold for a little bit. There was so much going on here. And when things started slowing down, I said, I just have to get back into this. So I reread everything that I had written, and there's some things that I'm still going to change, but I have a rule: don't change it until, you write the last line of the book. And so back in December, in November I started to write every single day practice again for my stuff, and I made that a priority before everybody else's stuff. And I've kept that up from November until just a couple weeks ago when I actually did write the last line of book 7. And I actually went and did, I think, 3 or 4 pages of book 8 because it's now in the works. But I feel like I finally am going to have this one out. So hopefully it'll be out later this year. That's the goal anyway. And book 8 will start and, maybe be out in 2022. I worked on, when you had mentioned this when you were reading the bio, I did a project a year and a little bit ago, called Plan Your Writing Year, and it's based on work that I've done in all the workshops for the last 13, 14 years. And it has prompts, but it also has theory behind different writing projects. So whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction or any iteration of those, there's a little bit of poetry, but you're the expert there, not me. But it's got a little bit of inspiration for that and kind of how to get started and how to keep your self-confidence going. So that's in the works. That one's pretty much finished. It's out with a couple of beta readers right now. Let's see. Oh, and I worked on my memoir last year, and I've been working on that one since 2012, and finally had time to work on that. And I think that's part of the reason that The Light Bearers was not quite finished last year, is because the memoir took up a big chunk of my brain power. That one's almost finished. I have about 3 chapters left to finish on that one, which sounds like a lot, but it's really not, because right now it's huge. So, yeah.
It's all relative. What
yeah.
types of aspects of your life are you covering in the memoir?
Well, you were talking about my horse earlier and the fact that we now live on a farm. When I was 12 years old, I met my best friend who retired and moved down here last year. And I guess I was 14. Yeah, I was 14 when at the barn they brought in this young foal and her mother that they had just bought, and I fell in love with this foal. She was 3 months old when I met her, and I started working with her, and we just kind of clicked. And when we moved to Georgia 2 years later, my parents bought her for me. And so I spent pretty much all of my life that my awareness life, and all of her life together. And she died in my arms at 32 in 2012. And so that was something else. So that's what I've been writing about. And the memoir is called Lessons from My Horse, and it's the things that I learned that I don't think I would have learned had I not had this responsibility from the time I was 14.
Wow, a 32-year relationship. What a powerful companion you had there.
Yeah, my husband was not happy when she died, but he said, good, now I have a chance to be number one. And that lasted 2 years, and then I got my horse Bliss. So he's like, well, it was nice while it lasted. But he said, she's like the epilogue, right? And I was like, no, she's a whole other book. He's like, okay, great.
And add a donkey just for good measure.
Oh, yeah, got to throw him in there.
Well, that's great. Yeah. Congratulations on the memoir coming along.
Thank you.
With just a little bit left on it.
Thank you. Yeah.
And that project, the 13-year accumulation of sort of putting together all your wisdom that you've been able to accumulate through all the workshops, that must be kind of cool to look back and see all the different details that you've brought together and all those years.
It is. I teach people stuff, but they teach me stuff too, and that's what a lot of this is all about, is that, when you're a writer, and you know this too, you never stop learning. Every time, with every project and with every person you meet who either reads your stuff or who you inspire, you learn something new about yourself and your writing, and that's really what this book is all about.
Yeah, absolutely, and the reflection and response we get from the writing teaches us something new about ourselves too, and it's just a constant learning experience with writing or anything in life, really, if you have that open mindset.
Exactly.
To continue, evolve, and try to improve on whatever it is you're doing in life. So that's really cool.
Yep.
So you teach all these different workshops on dispersed topics, whether it's creative writing or the memoir class that you're about to do, but you also teach the business aspect of writing as well. Can you talk a little bit about, because obviously writing and artists are in that sort of flighty level of ideas and floating around with their aspirations, but how do you find that balance point for them, bringing them back to the solid ground of, promotion and making a business push with their work?
Well, and I tell them that's the hard part. That's because they go, oh, isn't that why I hire an agent and a publisher? And I'm like, no, they don't do that for you really anymore. You have to be, the creative person and the business person. And writers, in large part, are introverts. So, that's why we hang out in little dark rooms all day and write things, and or seek our inspiration in from crowds, but then come back to our little dark office and write it. The business side of it is really what makes or breaks a writer, or any person. You've got to be able to promote yourself. And before I started writing my first novel years ago, which has not been published yet, and that's kind of in the works for later on. That'll be a whole other podcast, Scott, so I'll let you know about that one.
Okay.
But the business aspect that I had to my life before, I worked for a nonprofit organization for 6.5 years, and then I worked for a builder, a female builder who was really top of her field in this country, and I worked for her for 6 and a little bit years before 2008, and so that's where I transitioned from writing for magazines and newspapers to writing for business and mass consumption, and I think that's going to help a lot with people who are trying to promote books, because you can be an introvert and still be a good marketer as long as you understand people, and that's what I try and teach in my business workshops. You have to be able to listen.
Interpersonal relationships, that's sort of the make or break it of everything in life. It seems like it comes down to the
absolutely,
the quality of it all almost, which is for artists hard to swallow sometimes. As you said, there's the introverted aspect of it, and then there's also the selling of the soul sort of degree that comes in. So getting over that.
I just want to create things. I don't want to have to do this part. And I'm like, well, that's part of it, unfortunately, if you want to feed yourself on this.
Welcome to the real world. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we have to be adults all over again.
So with these writing classes that you teach, what's the average student that comes in? Is it someone that's already pretty deep into their writing? Is it people that are just starting out, a mix of everything? Who's showing up?
Yeah, it's a mix of everything, and that's one of the things I think that makes them so successful, is because I have people who have been writing in some capacity for most of their adult life, and then there are people who are like, this just sounded fun. I've always wanted to do this, or they wrote when they were in high school and then they gave it up because they did something completely different for their career. So I get people mixed, and at first, sometimes the writer who has been doing it for a while comes across as, very confident, or, willing to learn a new style or new techniques. And then the people who are just jumping in are like, oh, I'm out of my league. But everybody is in the same space. They start every class from the same space, and they support each other, and it becomes it's a sacred space is what it is. I mean, everybody's very respectful, and by the end of it, they're very connected, and I love watching that whole process. It usually takes, like the first class, if it's a multi-week class, the first class is, kind of feeling your way, it's almost like one of those little puzzles, like where do I fit in here, right? And then by week 2, they're like, well, I'm here. I'm going to just do my best. And so everybody kind of fits in by week 2 usually.
That's cool. I like the sacred space aspect of that. Everyone's
yeah.
in a comfortable energy and can really just let loose with things.
Right. And then I teach summer camp, too. So we didn't get to do that last year because they didn't have summer camp at Kennesaw. But we're back doing it again this year. So I teach 5th grade through 12th grade in 3 different segments, one upper elementary, one middle, and one high school segment. And so those people, I hear adults all the time say, oh, kids don't read. They have no interest in X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, oh, no, you don't understand. It's like maybe not all of them, but there's a segment of this population that these kids give me hope for the future. They're really good writers. They read. They're very aware of everything in the world around them. They're very good at observing and listening, and they excite me. So that's kind of cool, too.
Well, that's good news for the future, and it's also good that there are these opportunities for students who are like that, who want to be tapped in and turned on, to have an outlet where they can go and find that and not get discouraged, because sometimes it's hard to find those type of arenas to connect.
We had, this was so cool, and I need to share this with you, too, is last year, right before we were all shut down, I run the Emerging Authors Program through Foxtail Bookshop, which is currently on hiatus because we can't really get people in the shop, not a crowd like that. But the last one that we had last February, there was a young lady who came in, and she's a middle school teacher, and she wrote a young adult novel. And it was really good. I mean, she read a segment of it and told about her process and everything, and sold several copies of the book that night. But she said, you look so familiar. And I said, yeah. I said, you do too. I said, but her name was like, a fairly normal name. But I started doing my little introduction, and when she got up and spoke, she was like the 3rd or 4th one on the list. And she said, I thought I knew Beth. She said, and when she was talking about her history with writing and holding classes and stuff, I figured out where I knew her from. She said, I was one of her students at Kennesaw State, and I started this book in her class.
Oh, wow. How cool.
And I was like, oh, my God, that's the coolest thing ever, yeah.
Yeah, watching that seed sprout right in front of you, that's amazing.
Yeah, that thrills me to no end. And I'm like, people are like, what kind of a writer are you? What kind of what is the success rate of your students? And I said, well, a lot of them have published, but this one thrilled me to no end,
Talking about the idea of constantly trying to learn and stay in that creative fire and moving forward, what's some of the advice you give to people, and I guess this falls into the business and creative aspect of things, when you hit a creative plateau and then trying to push through that, things then become static for a while? How do you find the urge and the energy to break to that next level?
Right. You mean like all of 2020? No. Yeah. I think it's really just a matter of asking yourself, is this really what I want to do? And if you say, yes, I still want to be a writer, then it's you have to prove to yourself on a daily basis, because a writer doesn't talk about writing, a writer writes. And so when you say, I want to be a writer, if you're not going through the motions of it, you don't really want to be a writer. You like the idea of it, maybe, but you don't like the work of it, and you have to do the work.
Absolutely good advice. It's that practice aspect of things. You should be enjoying the drudgery almost on certain days of it, just as much as
there are days when it's not exciting. Yeah. There are days when it's not exciting, when all of your pens run out of ink on the same day, and you're like, oh, crap, So you just got to be prepared. You've got to have your tools in place, and you've got to do the work, because you're not going to build the novel or the memoir or the poem or the song or whatever it is that you're writing until you sit down and you do the work. And always be looking for inspiration. So there's people who are like, well, I don't know where I've got all these ideas, but I don't know which one. I'm like, well, you're not like under deadline right now. So just start writing each of them. And if you've got one that really just lights you up, use that and just keep going with it and stick with it and see where it goes. So I think that people think they've got to have the great American novel idea, and that's not it at all. The greatest advice that I can give someone is if it's not fun for you, it's not going to be fun for the reader. So if you stop having fun with the process of writing, you got to reevaluate what it is that you're doing.
Absolutely. That's very well said. I can almost look back to my days after high school when I lost my love for baseball and decided to hang it up, even though it had been the most pivotal thing in my life up to then. And then
right.
You reach that point, if you know it's not there anymore, you have to give it up. But thankfully I found writing after that, and so it hasn't.
Yeah, and thankfully you did, because you're pretty darn good at it.
Oh, I appreciate that. So, wow, obviously you're a very busy person. You've got events going on all over the place, teaching different classes, working on multiple projects, working on a farm. I don't know how you get it all done, but one of the other things you're now involved in is the Atlanta Writers Club. Can you talk a little bit about how you got involved with the events there?
Yeah, I've been a member for many, many, many years, and there were a couple of times I let it lapse because I was busy and I just couldn't commit to the meetings. But I have been a member consistently for the last, I want to say 5 or 6 years. And this past year was an oddly different year. We didn't get to go out on Saturdays. So I was like, all right, sure, I'll commit to going to the meetings online. Not a big deal. And in August, George Weinstein, who's the current president of Atlanta Writers Club, said he was looking for, people to work with different committees. And I used to be, when I worked nonprofit and did the writing for them and everything else, another thing that I did was organize events. I did that with the real estate developer too. I organized events and I got, guest speakers in and all sorts of interesting things. And so I said I'd really enjoy helping out with programs. Well, I went to a couple of board meetings and then a couple of the program meetings just with the breakout group. And all of a sudden they were like, hey, would you like to be the vice president of programs for next year? And I was like, what does that entail? They said, pretty much the stuff you're good at. And I was like, okay. So I've been working with Jill, who is coming in as the president this coming year. She'll be starting next month, and she's been the vice president of programs for a year. And she said, I'll help you. And I said, okay, great. So she and I are actually meeting the end of this week to kind of wrap up or at least wrap up as well as you can 7 or 8 months ahead of time, the programs for the rest of this year, for the rest of 2021. But it's really kind of cool because you get to talk to, and it's not like I've got to find everybody. I do find a lot of people, but everybody on the board has people they know and people they'd love to hear speak. And so there's always opportunities coming up, and it's really just a matter of saying, hey, when would you like to speak and what would you like your talk to be about? And you meet some very interesting people. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds like it. What have some of the themes for events that you've put together so far been about, and some of the speakers you've had?
I've kind of just assisted, because like I said, Jill is finishing up her year with programs. I've just been kind of shadowing her for the last couple of months. But I do have a friend, and I think you've met her, Burnett Sherman, and she's a sci-fi fantasy writer, and she does a whole lot of other things. I mean, she makes me look like I'm boring. She's got a lot on her plate. But last summer, she had some information about her, I think it's 6th generation grandfather, who was a freed slave after the Civil War. And she said she had the time to do it and she had the motivation to do it. And she sat down and wrote a fictional history based using, information that she had that was accurate. But this man was actually the founder of Jamestown, South Carolina, the first community where freed slaves were allowed to own property. He bought this acreage from someone who he convinced it was a good idea to sell to a freed slave, and he started this town, and Jamestown, South Carolina is still in existence today. So she wrote the history of that, about the founder of that, and that's her ancestor. And that was a really cool talk because she was talking about, looking through facts and, how you write historical fiction is you have to fill in based on knowledge of that time period. So even if there's like big holes in his story, it had to be historically accurate, even if it wasn't exactly his story. It was based on what she knew about the time. And it was a very, very good talk. And of course, we've got this poet guy coming up in May, which is kind of cool. We have, I was introduced to this lady who just moved here from California at the end of last year, and she's a comedy writer, and she writes scripts for television programs and everything else, and she'll be speaking later this year too. So, it's pretty cool. So as far as like having a theme for each meeting, I don't. I go based on who is available to speak at that particular meeting or to offer a particular workshop, and we schedule them out that way.
Well, that's great. Sounds like you're covering a lot of diverse topics, and I'm sure that was quite an experience for Burnett going through that personal journey, covering all that.
Yeah.
It's very cool. So you got the next 7 months tucked away there at Atlanta Writers Club, and all these other events going on. What's the rest of 2021 looking like for you overall?
For me, really, it's just now that my writing is back on track and I kind of know where I am on a daily schedule with that. It's now getting to convert the farm into. I'm helping my husband with we incorporated last year, so we're now an LLC. And we'll be doing some commercial work with our produce and everything. And so I get to be the marketing person for that because he said he is married to somebody who's got the chops for it, so he may as well use what he's got. So I feel really good there. I'm actually creating a flower segment of it. So I'll be selling blooms. There's this lady online who we were watching, and she inspired us to do it. And I love growing flowers anyway. So she has a bloom bar. She's up in I think she's in Canada, and she just puts different blooms into different vases on a particular day, or you pay a price and you go out with a pair of scissors and a bucket and you get X number of blooms for a price. And so we're going to be doing a bloom bar as part of our program this year, and starting it, getting our feet wet with it this year and then going into next year. So it's just kind of fun, And then, of course, riding my horse as often as I can because she is truly my inspiration. I work through everything doing stuff with her, so that's really cool.
Yeah, it must be really meditative being able to get out there with just the horse and the world, the wind at your ears. Well,
pretty much, yeah. As long as it's not a strong wind because she doesn't like that. So.
Well, yeah, this weather here the last week or so must be just ideal for both of you. That's great.
It was perfect, yeah.
Well, that's awesome about the farm, being LLC and all the new projects you've got going on there. It's really inspiring talking to you because you have such an entrepreneurial spirit, so much going on. It gets me fired up. I want to go out and get some more stuff done somewhere. So.
It's really a matter of priorities, like we've talked about before. It's just you make your priorities and you live them. And sometimes you go, this sounds like a great idea, and you try it, and you're like, not quite so much. So, we're in this life to try things. So it's a matter of we're fulfilling our purpose if we are trying things and then figuring out what really lights us up. So that's a cool thing.
Absolutely, and just doing things that inspired and motivated to keep moving forward. So that's awesome. Well, Beth, it's been awesome catching up with you again and hearing about all the exciting things you have going on. Where can people go to find out more about your work and to pick up your books and to find out about the workshops?
Oh, absolutely. Let's see. BethHermes.com I tried to keep it very simple. And I have a calendar that I do need to update for the second quarter. I went on there the other day and I was like, oh my goodness, I went through March. I guess I was thinking I was going to be other places, and but it's all still virtual right now. My books are available through Foxtail Bookshop in Woodstock. And if people are in the 50-plus program, age group, whatever, they can take classes with me through the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at Kennesaw State University. I have classes that are ongoing through that. So I'm in the middle of an 8-week class right now, in the week 2 of it. And then I have another one that's going to be over the summer. It'll be 2 6-week classes that I'll be doing then. And you can go to the Kennesaw State website and find out there about writing classes and other classes if you want to do something creative. They've got a bunch of stuff going on. But, yeah, I try and put all the links to every place I'm going to be on BethHermes.com on the calendar.
Okay, fantastic. A great nexus for everyone to go check out. Well,
Thank
thanks
you
once again, Beth, and look forward to talking to you again soon and the event coming up next month, and just happy to hear all the great stuff you have going on.
Great. Thank you, Scott. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Have a great rest of your week.
You too. Thanks. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks, Beth. All right, everyone. Go check out BethHermes.com and find out more about her series of books there, and check out the workshops as well. And thanks for tuning in tonight, everyone. If you enjoyed the show, please do spread the word by sharing the episode link. Be back here next Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Until then, Selah.
In my mind's eye, a plantation. In the clearing is a platform station. In the distance is a kingdom. Into the front line is how I'm coming. Let's stay in war, all is fair. I'm headed to the field in spite of my condition. Whatever you thought, whatever you thought, you know I told you I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop. Now through the desert, out to the sea, weather beaten through all 4 seasons. Now there is love in my creation. I've come back for all the right reasons. That ain't your castle, you're not a queen. It isn't yours, that you're so busy that protecting. Whatever you thought, whatever you thought, you know I told you I couldn't stop. Whatever you thought, whatever you thought, you know I told you I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop. All this beauty and sticky sweet, this naughty world is due for a good deed. Give me your poor, tired huddled masses. Bring me the head of a mule in my glasses. Sing that lonesome high melody. I rumble your man, but rumble behind me. told you I couldn't stop. Whatever you thought, whatever you thought, you know I told you I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop.